Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about living the question, particularly the big questions of our life. And living the question is a concept that was introduced to me years ago by a spiritual advisor who was also a house cleaning client. As many of you know, I was a maid for a long time, and it's a testament to the idea that if we follow what's right for us in the moment, even if it doesn't make any sense, if we just do what feels like the next right thing, we are following our optimal path. And I fell into house cleaning after 2 failed businesses. The first was highly ambitious. I went to Russia with my father in 1991. It was just before the fall of the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev was still in power. And we went on a business exchange cruise from Moscow to Leningrad and back. It was an amazing, life-changing 2-week trip. There were 50 Americans and 200 Russians on the boat. And Russia was kind of like the Wild West in those days. Gorbachev, through glasnost and perestroika programs, was trying to westernize Russia and get the Soviet Union into the world economy. And we were there in June during what they call the White Nights. And the riverboat we were on traveled north along the Moscow River through incredibly beautiful countryside. And every day we would stop in a different port, take a boring tour of some church that had been turned into an ammunition depot. At least that's what it felt like to me. But I got to meet really incredibly interesting Russians. And that was the point of the trip, was to teach Russians about capitalism and business and to help people make connections for potential joint venture businesses between the Soviets and the West. And I fell in love with the Russian people. I also fell in love with a little Russian mafia boyfriend, but we'll save that whole story for another time. My father, in fact, fell in love with one of the interpreters, who later became his wife. Another long story. But we made these incredible connections on that trip. In fact, it was a tremendous gift because it was the last time I spent any extended or in-depth time with my father. In fact, we arrived in Leningrad on the day of the summer solstice, and it's so far north, the sun only dipped below the horizon for an hour or two. It never got dark, and we stayed up all night, my Russian friends singing folk songs and drinking vodka, talking a blend of minimal English and my own budding Russian. Я не говорю по-русски. I do not speak Russian, but it's the only language I ever learned more than 5 words in, I think. To date, my only regret in life is that I don't speak another language fluently, and I still have time to work that out. And the whole trip was sponsored by this very conservative business entrepreneurial organization that my father was involved in, that he heard about through Rush Limbaugh. He was a very big Rush Limbaugh fan. And I am not. But anyway, Rush Limbaugh had tremendous influence in my life by that trip. When I left for Russia, I was on the edge of being engaged to a guy I had been living with for 3 years. And after my little affair with the Russian mafioso, that relationship ended. And I started a whole new chapter of my life. Thanks, Rush. Anyway, we never know where the directive or corrective influences will come in our life. You never know how the conservatives will help you. And so we tried unsuccessfully for the next year to start a joint venture with Russia. Many of them, in fact, because at that point, Russia was the Wild West and everything was for sale. And when we returned to Moscow in October and November, everything had changed. There had been a revolution and Boris Yeltsin was in charge. And all of the hard currency that Gorbachev had amassed to support these capitalist programs had disappeared. And so one by one, our Soviet joint ventures stopped answering their phones. But we were inspired, so we started an import business of Russian goods and crafts and opened a little retail store down on Cape Cod. Did the flea market circuit, had an adorable little cart filled with beautiful matryoshka dolls and other Russian crafts. Failed miserably, and I ended up cleaning houses for this guy that I was dating, not the Russian. He never made it to America, least not on my visa. But I ended up cleaning houses just to make rent. And like many things in life, it had its own trajectory, and unexpectedly, with very little energy from me, I had a full schedule of house cleaning clients within a couple of months. And although it wasn't as sexy as being an international joint venture entrepreneur, I loved cleaning houses. And over time, through much serendipity, I had many clients that changed and redirected my life, including meeting my primary spiritual teacher in 1999 when I moved to San Francisco from Boston, Dr. Isa Gucciardi of the Foundation of the Sacred Stream, which didn't exist at that point. But that's how I discovered much of the basis of the spiritual psychology and open door growth work that I do and teach today. I used to clean the toilet in her office, along with the other rooms of her fabulous house in St. Francis Woods in San Francisco. And I got curious and we began to trade work, and I had the privilege of being in her first class in 2000, the same time I started graduate school for transpersonal psychology. But I had already been living the question, although I wouldn't have named it that, for some time. And asking the right question or questions will lead us to the best answers. And approaching life as a conversation with God or the goddess, universal mind, the larger consciousness system, whatever wording feels most authentic or meaningful to you. Words are very powerful because they point to concepts. The words are not the concepts, but using accurate words points more clearly to the channel of consciousness that we are pointing to or conversing with. So I always encourage people to play around with wording in their spiritual life, in your prayers, your journaling, your meditations, and contemplation. Try the Lord's Prayer using goddess instead of God. Our Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy names. Really different flavor and texture. Notice how that feels. And the question behind spiritual wordplay, if we're going to talk about living the question, is, or could be, what is my relationship with the divine? How can I best connect with the life force? What approach to spirituality is most useful, powerful, or meaningful to me? And living the question means to be open, open-hearted, open-minded, playful, experimental, present, aware, paying attention. And there are many questions and many big questions that we can bring to the universe. One of the big questions that clients and mentees often bring to me is, what is my life purpose? What am I here for? They don't actually bring that question to me because I can't answer it, but teaching them how to live the question is a practice that will bring us to the answers. In this conversational nature of reality, as my favorite poet David White likes to call it, asking spirit or source for guidance, direction, clarity. And that's not an answer that's going to come on Tuesday, most likely, but opening to align ourselves with the flow of life and our individual part in it. And we all do have an individual part. That is the path to joy and fulfillment. Most of us seek. And if you seek, you will find. And so living the question is to clarify and hold these big questions in our life, to ask them in our prayer, meditation, to talk to others about them, to read or do artwork, to write poetry, again, to play and experiment with the ways that we ask that question, and then be open and receptive to the answers that come back to us. And the answers may come through our own intuition, through our dreams, through a podcast, or a YouTube, or a book that falls off the shelf, or a conversation on a bus. And again, it's usually not a single answer, although occasionally it is. But a conversation is rarely a single word exchange. It's an ongoing give and take that has flow, continuity. And learning how to pay attention, learning how to listen to the universe and its response to our deepest questions, not just today, not just next week, but to hold these questions like a decoration on the coffee table in the middle of our living room, to look at it, care for it every day. Maybe the big questions in our life are more like a plant that needs to be cared for, nurtured, trimmed and watered so that it will grow healthy, bloom, and bear fruit in our life. So why do I tell the story about Russia and joint ventures and dangerous boyfriends? Aside from the fact that it's a really fucking amazing and fun story, which I'm so glad I had that experience. Many of us travel a very winding path as we live these big questions like, what is my purpose here? What is the meaning of life? How can I make the world a better place? Or one of my favorites, what brings me joy? And the winding path itself can help to clarify our question. And certainly as we follow it, whatever our own unique path is, if we hold these questions, then the path that we each follow is living our way into the answer. And life is a journey to be experienced and enjoyed, not a riddle to be solved. But when we approach our life experience with curiosity, open-mindedness, even playfulness, we can be much more receptive to this conversation with the life force. Have some fun with it. On my recent retreat in Mexico with Igor Kufayev and the Flowing Wakefulness organization, learning about Kashmir Shaivism and Hinduism, the concept that the creative forces of the universe, the Shiva Shakti, the potentiality and the expression, are in a cosmic dance, even perpetually making love, a little different than the Judeo-Christian celibacy approach. How would it be to make love to life? I was reading on Reddit recently, someone struggling with the idea of finding their path. They said, every hallway I travel, the doors all seem to be shut, and I'm 35, and I'm running out of time. And I told them, I'm 58, and I'm just starting my career and having a whole new phase of my life. If you're 35, if you're lucky, you probably have another 50 years left. That's a long-ass time. And if we knock on doors and they don't open, or if they seem to close after a short time, rather than being discouraged, that's information. I've tried to get certified in about 8 different modalities. Hakomi, lifespan integration, depth hypnosis. About 7 or 8 years ago, I revisited the idea of becoming licensed as a marriage and family counselor. I have a master's degree in transpersonal psychology, but I decided after taking an ethics class that I did not want to be beholden to the Board of Psychology as the governing body of my moral decisions with people, and that source was the higher authority in my practice. The Board of Psychology doesn't even approve of most of what I do and find to be the most profound healing practices. So it feels a little bit out of integrity to ask for their approval for things they don't even agree with, like soul retrieval and spiritual awakenings. But anyway, I called them to see if I could do the last 20 credits and the 3,000 hours to get licensed. And they said, oh, we don't accept the master's degree for transpersonal psychology anymore. You would need to redo your master's program to get licensed. Well, that door slammed shut pretty quick. So I'm not supposed to get licensed. I'm not supposed to be certified by others. And over in my own therapy and spiritual advising sessions with my own advisors, it seems clear that I'm supposed to pursue content creation in spiritual psychology, open door growth work, in supporting and integrating all of these different practices like neo-shamanism, internal family systems, and the many other modalities incorporated into my work. And apparently, in the answer to my own question of show me what to do to be of maximum benefit to myself and others, how do I use my own gifts and talents for the benefit of the most people and myself? That's my personal mission statement, or the question that I try to live. And the answer seems to be, obviously, I'm not supposed to follow just one particular modality. And so living the questions in our life, should I have children? Should I have a partner? How do I follow my joy? Is to hold these questions lightly, playfully, to bring them into our prayer, our journaling, our meditation, our exercise or yoga practice. Wherever we connect spiritually, bring them to the ocean if you surf, to the earth if you garden, and pay attention to the inner intuition, instinct, the subtle feelings and nudges that we get, particularly what feels good. And pay attention to what doesn't feel good. I like to call that our inner compass of joy and suffering. And I think it is a compass on our path as we live these questions. Life could be seen as a treasure hunt And the big questions in our life are the treasures that we seek to find. And there's no right or wrong with questions. That's part of our free will. I'm taking a class on shamanic palm reading with my favorite New York shaman, Yitzhak Beery, fabulous man, the New York Shaman Circle. And I would never have it for palm reading if I didn't experience it with Yitzhak. He had me hold my palm up to the camera on a Zoom meeting that I did with him. And without knowing me at all, looking at my palm, he nailed my core issue as needing to be loved. And he nailed my life purpose that I'm pretty clear of now. In his words, I wouldn't use these words. He said, "You are to be the grand witch that you are meant to be." And I don't use the word witch. Some people have used the word bitch, but I absolutely am a white witch, training my mentees in white witchhood. But that word's just way too loaded with cultural issues, so I don't really identify with it. But in this palm reading course, very interesting, the idea is that around 4 or 5 months of development in a fetus still in the womb, there's a massive influx of energy. Some would say that's when the soul enters the body, and that's when the palms begin to develop. And in Yitzhak's tradition or belief, the soul decides or agrees to a purpose or learning path before it incarnates. And that soul purpose, that life path, is etched in our palms. And the traumas that we have in life and the joys are meant to lead us and clarify that soul purpose. And the more we can align with and live that purpose, the greater our sense of fulfillment. And so probably the ultimate question as a human is, what is my soul's purpose here? And adding the word soul purpose as opposed to just what is my purpose here deepens and grounds that question. And the idea, what is my soul purpose, moves that question deeper into my own psyche, my own self-responsibility, free will, agency, my connection with the larger consciousness system on a soul level. Whereas for some, just asking the question, what is my purpose, feels like an answer that would only come from the outside, that it's given to us, pressed upon us, rather than something that we perhaps are willingly agreed to, dancing on the cosmic dance floor of ordinary reality. And so I invite and encourage you to clarify the big questions and live them. Hold them loosely, but carry them with you as you walk down the street, as you go to work, as you eat, make love, meditate, or pray. Participate in this conversational nature of reality. Ask the question over and over like a little child, and the answers will deepen, and they will clarify your next steps, and may they lead you in interesting, exciting, fulfilling, and deeply engaging experiences as you live into these answers for yourself. Thank you so much for listening. I'm accepting applicants for my 2023 mentorship program, and there's some pre-mentorship requirements. If you're interested, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. Or drop me a note if you'd like to find out how a block of spiritual psychology work might benefit you in your life. There's a link to the free download of my first chapters of my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, in the show notes. I'm back on Instagram after getting hacked and shut down at Renee_LaValle McKenna. Done a pretty good job of navigating that and not being overly annoyed. I can do it peacefully. Anyway, trusting the process, trying to find humor, deep gratitude to those who've been making donations and my supporters on Patreon. Really looking forward to my first live event since before the pandemic, doing a weekend retreat here in New York City on manifesting the goddess, how each of us in our own life is the door, the temple, and the altar. And I'm looking forward to doing more live events in 2023, hoping to do something in Chicago and something on the West Coast, maybe something in Florida. And I'm talking to a new practitioner from England in a little while. I do have my sights set on Europe and the UK for the future. So keep you posted on live Open Door Growth events. Blessings on your path as you live your own deepest questions. Until we meet again, this is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.